expectant silence, but my colleagues are telling me the live stream hasn't started yet, so we will. Okay, so hello and welcome everyone to this latest event from MCC Brussels, Rule of Law in Poland, Double Standards and Abuse. I'm Jacob Reynolds, the head of policy for MCC Brussels. We're really delighted to have you all here today. I guess the seeds of this event were sown many months ago when I was doing one of the less interesting parts of my job, which is trawling through some of the events from more insider bubble think tanks and looking at what they are thinking and saying. And one caught my eye, which was an event they'd organized only a week or two after the election of Donald Tusk. And they were hosting an event. The name kind of escapes me, but the essence of the event was that already they were forecasting what they called a new re-democratization playbook that was about to be rolled out in Poland. And this think tank, which receives money from all of the usual suspects, both EU institutions, Soros-linked foundations, et cetera, but they were kind of salivating at the opportunity for trying out something they'd been thinking about for a while, which was how do you undo the supposed damages of the previous government in Poland. And they'd worked out a number of things that they were going to focus on, kind of taking control of the media, having a clean out of the cultural institutions, going after the judiciary. And we were discussing this in the office, and we thought, well, isn't this all of the things that the Tusk government precisely were accused of doing? But because it was being done by, the previous government were accused of doing, but because this was being done by the Tusk government, this was something to not just be celebrated, but also to be looked at as a potential model for other countries in Europe that had taken, to quote, the wrong path, and that they had to have some of their democracy restored. So this got us thinking about both the hypocrisy involved in this, but also the way that the term, the rule of law, had kind of been robbed of all of its meaning, become very much just a political weapon, and that actually some of the gravest abuses of the idea of the rule of law were maybe being perpetrated by not those that were initially accused of it, countries at the time in Poland or in Hungary, but actually some of the political opposition. So we wanted to dig into this a little bit, and we're delighted that we've now had an opportunity to put this into practice, and have got a really fantastic panel who you'll hear from in just a moment, but I'll introduce them very briefly in the order that they're going to speak. So first we got Jerzy Kwiatkowski, who's president of the board of Ordo Juris. He came over and spoke for us at another event a couple of months ago, and was really fantastic. He's always excellent value, so we're really delighted that he's here. Next we'll be hearing from Anna Brilka, MEP, who, as most people probably know, recently joined with a couple of colleagues the Patriots for Europe group, which we're obviously very happy about at MCC Brussels, but I think also, as you can tell from her smile, so is Anna. So really delighted to welcome Anna. And then also we'll be hearing from Tobias Bożniewski, who's again an MEP, but in the ECR group. So can we give a warm welcome to our panel? Thank you. So please, Jerzy.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be a guest of a Hungarian think tank in a Polish panel in Brussels, speaking freely, and that's the most important part of this evening, speaking freely about double standards and abuse that we are experiencing back at home in Poland. Because for now, this kind of critique that I will deliver today is still legal. However, I will finish this speech with general information on 30, as it was admitted by the Minister of Justice, 30 leaders of NGOs that their homes were searched, and some of them were arrested by the government in the previous months, and all of those 30 NGOs were conservative NGOs active in the political sphere. And that just puts some light to the situation that we are experiencing back at home. It is not only a theoretical issue, it's a very practical one. Because finally, the price for violation of rule of law, the price for militant democracy, the price for transitional justice implemented by Donald Tusk government is paid by the citizens. It is May this year, as I remember, that Ursula von der Leyen said, I quote, "I congratulate Prime Minister Donald Tusk and his government. The ongoing restoration of the rule of law in Poland is great for the Polish people and for our union as a whole. It is a testament to the resilience of the rule of law and democracy in Europe." And then Vera Jourova followed with, I quote, "I welcome the positive trend of the Polish authorities aiming at restoring judicial independence and addressing other concerns related to Article 7 procedure. It is good for the EU and good for Poland that this procedure might be soon closed." Those positive remarks in the last weeks of the political campaign, election campaign, were closed with another, I will close with another quote from Ursula von der Leyen. In Katowice in Poland, she said, "Poland is making a comeback. It's not just a return to the basic values and principles that have been formed here for more than 100 years. Poland is also returning as a leader of Europe." I do not have to add that those sentences had their own influence and power during the last weeks of political campaign for the European Parliament in Poland. But what truly happened, that they may have said there is a comeback, the restoration of rule of law, the restoration of independence of judiciary, while not a single legal act was implemented by the parliament and entered in Poland or formed the judiciary, changed anything in the judiciary. In fact, the only action taken by the government was to present the action plan to the Commission in the first months of this year. Nothing else changed, theoretically, because nothing else could have changed, because the government does not control every branch of the government. The President of the Republic is still a conservative. And without a presidential power, not a single legal act may be introduced, not a single legal act may change the judiciary of Poland. Nevertheless, it was a breakthrough, a comeback, and a restoration of rule of law. However, something changed. It was a new doctrine of constitutional law. It was a new doctrine of government in action. This doctrine was named by invoking two well-known notions. The first one being transitional justice. The second one, militant democracy. And those two legal doctrines were introduced openly by the government as a doctrinal disguise for, in fact, authoritarian coup d'etat and liberal takeover of the state. And what is happening now in Poland? Those 11 months of Donald Tusk government, we, as independent observers, lawyers, academics, we perceive as a liberal laboratory for Europe, a liberal laboratory for coup d'etat, a kind of a liberal playbook that is being prepared and then may be offered as a know-how to other emerging liberal governments in post-conservative states in European Union. But if I mentioned transitional justice and militant democracy, let me quote Donald Tusk, 10th of September this year, saying, "We have a need today to act in these terms of militant democracy. I mean, we will probably make mistakes more than once, or commit acts that, according to some legal authorities, will be incompatible or not fully in accordance with the provisions of the law. But nothing relieves us from the responsibility to act every day. I, daily, have to make decisions that can be very easily criticized and challenged from the legal side. But without these decisions, I would actually make no sense at all for me to take the responsibility of running the work of the government." And his surprising sincerity in those few sentences was followed by similarly honest declaration of Adam Bodnar, Minister of Justice. What is happening is that we are restoring the constitutional order. And we are looking for some legal justification for that. This combination of transitional justice and militant democracy is what characterizes current regime in Poland, operating under the guise of noble legal doctrines, while in fact violating the basic precepts of rule of law, constitutional model of government, separation of powers, independence of judiciary, and independence of public media. Let me name 4 principles of liberal takeover. The first principle, media, because it all started with takeover of public media. On December 19th last year, it was the first act of a new government, just 6 days after it was sworn in. The acting Minister of Culture and National Heritage, Colonel Bartłomiej Sienkiewicz, dismissed the existing chief executives of the boards of Polish TV, Polish Radio, Polish Press Agency, as well as the supervisory boards of these companies, and appointed new supervisory boards in their place, which appointed new management boards. The minister's actions were undertaken in violation of statutory provisions that invest all powers over public media in order to secure their independence in the Council of National Media, that couldn't have been taken over without statutory intervention and without the consent of the president. During the forced and violent police takeover of the public media buildings, because it was in fact a violent fight over the buildings, broadcasting signal of Polish public television and radio has been intentionally turned off for the first time since martial state was introduced in 1981 to purge the country from solidarity freedom movement. That is something that is absolutely open, and that is something that is absolutely close to every citizen in Poland. Everybody experienced that for the first time since 1981. The second principle of this playbook is a takeover of the courts, of course. First, the National Judicial Council and independence of judges. Also in December last year, the resolution was adopted in order to, and it was done, of course, in flagrant violation of the Polish constitution. The resolution calls members of the National Council of Judiciary to immediately cease their activities in this constitutional body, and declares every decision of this council since 2018 to 2023 as null and void. What does it mean? It means that we have 2,500 judges, at least, nominated by a constitutional body declared by the parliament against the constitution as, in fact, non-judges at all. Thousands of their decisions being non-verdicts at all. The next is takeover of the National Prosecutor Office. What does it mean, takeover of the National Prosecutor Office? It means the takeover of the whole tree of prosecutor offices across Poland. All criminal proceedings that are taken over by the new government in open violation of the Act securing independence of the prosecutor office. It has been admitted by the Supreme Court in September, but what was the reaction of the government? The government declared the decisions of the Supreme Court null and void. And of course, what will happen next? With the control over media, control over courts, control over criminal proceedings, this year, as it was admitted by the Minister of Justice, 30 politicians, board members of NGOs, homes were searched, documents, computers, and phones taken. Some of them, like the Catholic priest Father Olszewski, were arrested. The Independence March Association that organized yesterday's march of 300,000 people in Poland, in Warsaw, was also searched, and many of their belongings were taken by the police. It is the current situation of Poland. many of my clients, I'm a lawyer in Warsaw, are absolutely unsure of the final outcomes of their own criminal or civil proceedings. They do not know if the prosecutors they are running against are validly elected or not, if indictments are validly signed or not. Are judges deciding their cases judges or not? This is the outcome of the fight for the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation. The topic is extremely difficult, as it is definitely a political issue, not a legal one. I will first start with a general description of the affairs, then present the situation in Poland. Firstly, the rule of law has no definition. In my opinion, it is a tool of political and financial blackmail. It is being used to interfere in the internal policies of the member states. Secondly, the biggest problem with the rule of law is in the EU itself. Thirdly, the issue is not the rule of law, but the right wing in the general with their conservative, freedom, traditional view, traditional value, which is a threat to the EU establishment. 1 year ago, we had elections in Poland, leading to the new left liberal government. And this new government does not hide the fact that the law rules are chosen as if they were being picked off the restaurant menu. Tusk does exactly the same thing they criticized Kaczyński for. Peace, Law and Justice wanted to change the rules of the game with acts, however, did not even have a constitutional majority. The Donald Tusk government wants to do the same, but with the help of resolution, legal opinions, etc. It can be seen that even the Prime Minister of Poland breaks the law himself. The question must be asked, how is it that when one government violates the law, the whole world is immediately worried? EU officials come to Poland to lodge complaints, Venice Commission creates reports, and European Parliament tries to look for resolution. NGOs, organizations arrange conferences, leaving judges out on the street. When dealing with a role reversal, asymmetry promptly appears. It was during the time of the rule of peace that it was seen as a crime, whereas now it is seen as an ordinary mistake. In Poland, the situation is very clear. Legal pathology develops in the light of the day, telling us when we are back on the right track. Next issue would be EU legal relativism. Until recently, the PiS government negotiated every issue related to the Polish judicial system. When asked about the illegal activities of the new government in Poland, the spokesman of the European Commission said that the European Commission does not interfere with its internal affairs. So, this is the double standards. Unlocking funds from the next generation EU is not so much the repair of the rule of law, but above all, a complete change of government. The right is the problem, not the rule of law. The right is the problem of the elites. In my opinion, the rule of law is an internal matter. We do not intend to seek help outside the Polish state, which is why I condemn all attempts to appeal to this or that, the European card. This problem can and must be solved by Polish forces in a democratic process that will remove the enemies of the rule of law from power. To emphasize the key point, the right is treated worse not for what it has done, but for the fact that it's simply the right. The right is being allowed to decide less. For instance, in my group in the European Parliament, Patriots for Europe, politicians who were democratically elected do not have the opportunity to represent their voters. And this is a political decision of the EU establishment. And this situation will not last forever because such marginalization of specific political parties, such as the right-wing parties, only strengthens them. Before us is a very difficult task, the task to return to normality. And I think that Trump's victory should be an example for us, but also a hope this normality will prevail. Thank you so much.
Sorry, we're very constrained for space on the stage.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here with you. I would like to thank you for your kind invitation and for the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm a great admirer of unlimited freedom of speech, and here in Brussels, in the MCC, that creates such space for unrestricted debate, so thank you for that. We have a problem with the rule of law, but not where the European elites would like to see it. Maybe in Poland today there is such a problem, but not in Poland when Law and Justice, my party, right-wing government ruled between 2015 and 2023. Not in Hungary, not in Italy. We have a problem with the rule of law in a European Commission. The European Commission, as well as representatives of the European bureaucracy or left-to-center members of European Parliament, are not interested in diagnosing the state of the rule of law in a member states. Their goal is to fight political opponents by any means available in a spirit of Niccolo Machiavelli. Between the years 2015 and 2023 in Poland, when the Law and Justice, my party, was in power, we did not face any crisis of the rule of law. We work, however, to deeply reform our judiciary system in order to speed up court cases, improve procedures, depoliticize courts which are deeply influenced by their relationships with left-to-center politicians. Even before we presented the first draft of the reform, we already heard that we are murderers of democracy, fascists, etc. The opposition announced at that time it would be so-called total opposition, fighting the government with the help of the street and the foreign agents. And that so-called foreign agents turned out to be, among others, the European Commission. Under the guise of big ideas, the European Commission started a political game with Poland. The government was accused of violations of rule of law. What we call the rule of law is a concept from the borderline between political and legal science. It is not a clearly defined concept which consequently allows it to be used as an ideological weapon against political opponents. It is purely a matter of discretion to determine what is the rule of law in the broadest sense and what is not. The European Commission greatly enjoyed itself while playing around with different concepts as well as the terms and conditions imposed on the Polish government. It benefited from doing so in two ways. First, it allowed it to position the Polish government in the role of supplicant vis-à-vis the so-called European government. And the second, it allowed them to torment Poland's ruling conservatives by portraying them as uncivilized legal barbarians in contrast to Enlightenment opposition. Thus, the European Commission has allowed itself to use the European treaties as a foundation to fight with political opponents. What does the rule of law mean for the Commission? What will be recognized as such? There is no single clear-cut definition. Between 2015 and 2023, the European Commission continuously attacked Poland's conservative government for violating the rule of law. After the elections were won by the opposition, who has ties to Madame von der Leyen, the CDU, and the European mainstream politicians, suddenly Madam President came to Poland and announced that there are no more problems with rule of law in Poland. In the meantime, not a single piece of legislation has changed. No new international agreements have been ratified. No new measures have been taken. The only thing that changed were the names in the Polish government. This is a glaring example of double standards, which are nothing more than the use of principles enshrined for noble purposes in the EU treaties for ruthless, low-level political struggle. This leads us to the conclusion that the European Union, in its current form, is not a community of ideas or principles. It's a community of power and force, a community of establishment that believes that they are only ones who have the right to be in power in Europe, an establishment that will destroy anyone seeking to remove it from power by any means available. This is the lesson of what the European rule of law really is, that we have learned in recent years. And this is why we need a deep reform of the European Union, which should return to its roots. Thank you.
Thanks. So three really interesting introductions. Maybe a little bit of a agreement on the panel. But one of the things I wanted to dig into before coming out to the audience is, I mean, to put everyone on the spot a little bit, and is the rule of law concept actually a useful concept, or has it become so kind of politicized that we're maybe better off abandoning it? I remember when we first came to Brussels as MCC Brussels, one of the first reports that we did was on the weaponization of the rule of law. And I know that at some vague general level, the idea of having a state that obeys the laws, the most kind of general concept of the rule of law, is something that we're, like, nobody's going to necessarily argue against that. But and so I guess I put it to you, when we're trying to decry, or as we're trying to decry some of the very authoritarian measures of the Tusk government, is it useful to frame that ourselves as a violation of the rule of law? Or are we better off attacking it on different terms? Jerzy, maybe you first.
Of course, the principle of rule of law, as it is implemented in the European Union, it is implemented in the jurisprudence, in the treaties, it is implemented in the practice of the European agencies since 70s and 80s, has been weaponized probably for the first time in 2000 against Austria. And then this weaponization of rule of law developed and somehow was developed in fight against the Hungarian government and then against the Polish government in the last 8 years. Nevertheless, when we speak of the rule of law doctrine and the rule of law in European Union and its application to different member states and their own internal situation, I totally agree with both Tobias and Anna when they say that we do not need this European Union involvement in our own nation-state level, even now when we fall victim to unruly behaviors of the government. Because it is up to the national democracy, it is up to the local democracy and the nation to deal with our own government. And probably the best option when it comes to the doctrine of rule of law is to divide the rule of law doctrine into the formal and material spheres. When it comes to a formal sphere, we only deal with procedures. We only deal with procedures, and mostly with procedures concerning European Union law and European Union decisions. And then when it comes to material rule of law, we deal with values, we deal with principles, and that is best solved on the national level, because we differ in European Union. The European Union is diverse, and it is not the best solution to take it, to escalate it to the decisions on the general level.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important point, because the confusion of values and law is often a recipe for disaster, and we have
Human rights.
Yeah, and we have moralized law rather than actually the rule of law, right? And Anna.
Yes, of course, I agree with Mr. Kwaśniewski. And like I said, that rule of law is, in my opinion, is the tool to interfere in the internal policies. In Poland, we have a very, very big problem with the judicial system. And I see the one option to solve this problem I think, the new constitution and restart everything at the beginning, because now we are in Poland. We have very, very big mess in the justice system. So it's very difficult to find a solution, and unfortunately we need cooperation with different parties from Poland, so it's very, very difficult task to solve this judicial system, judicial problem system.
Tobias?
Yes, the rule of law is a very important part of our Western history, of our legal and political thought. You know, there's a very nice example from, if you think about 18th century Kingdom of Great Britain and the France. When the soldiers knocked in France to the door of someone, he said, "Open in the name of the king." And in Great Britain, he said, "Open in the name of the law." Because the law is, the law should be equipped by restraints or arbitrary power, because the power, of course, absolute power corrupts absolutely every power, corrupts everyone, as Lord Acton said, you know. So rule of law is very interesting, very good, and very deeply rooted concept in our Western civilization. But the problem is different, that this principle of rule of law and democracy in European treaties, it is a now idea from the left and from the center politicians in Europe to make, as Anna said, the tool to fight with all governments, which are right-wing governments, or governments against the establishment in the European Union. And the same thing is in United States. Trump is portrayed like arbitrary tyrant, Mussolini, etc., etc. So all liberal establishment should fight with him in the name of the law. But all these definitions are, meddled now.
Yeah, and I think it suggests we need to get onto the morality of what's going on a little bit more. But I want to kind of stimulate the discussion further by having a few questions or contributions from our audience. So I think a couple of my colleagues have some microphones. So I'll take a couple of questions and then we'll come out. But yes, at the front and then Frank. Yeah. Right. We'll just let a microphone get you. It's on. Just start speaking, they'll figure it out.
And there's an evident collision. I'm coming from Warsaw, where we had a few days ago a conference in the Constitutional Tribunal. The title was convened by the President, Madame Przyłębska. The title was In Defense of the Rechtsstaat. What I'm trying to say is that this debate, please excuse me, all those who presented their views a little bit out of date and obsolete. The first bad news is that it does not serve the purpose to multiply the descriptions and to articulate them in close circles of those who know them and believe in them and don't need to be told. Second, that denouncing the evident that it was not rule of law, but it was a weapon, also is an evident truth. And that these methods are being used universally now, because now President of the United States is a criminal. They attempted to make him a criminal, and now he, thanks to the votes of people, he will be the president. So we need a reflection which goes further than multiplying arguments and descriptions, further than repeating and repeating again within our small bubble versus the mainstream huge bubble, the truth. The question is of a political order. How to win, not how to convince. And our mistake from the very beginning was that it is wrong to take those arguments about non-rule of law, or lawlessness in Poland, in Hungary, seriously. We did take them seriously. I was trying to tell my colleagues from the Jobro group, why do you try to prove that you are not a camel? Because they know that you are not, but they're using it. So the problem is of the nature of political battle and not going down to the definitions and descriptions and precisions of the rule of law. The first and the last argument, referring to the treaties, should be Article 2 says in a declarative way that union is a community of rule of law, full stop. It is not prescriptive. It doesn't give union any right of action no further in any part of the both treaties. You find any competence in that respect. But they did use. And our sin and mistake was that we said, okay, but we'll explain you that we are not violating. We gave them argument and we legitimized their argument. This was our primary sin and mistake. So, last remark, which I did raise at the tribunal in Poland. The bad side of the prospect for future is that Brussels, that's my thesis, Brussels contaminates member states with rule of law violations. The complete violation of rule of law here by departures and violations of the treaties, a long story, makes possible that lawlessness today reigns in Poland under Tusk government. If not Brussels, there would be no Tusk government in Poland. So we should start, and I know, and I am very happy and congratulative that in MCC there is a work on the report on the violation of the rule of law in the EU institutions. We should stop defending, go back from defending, as we do mostly. We should attack Brussels for lawlessness, and then we'll solve the problem of fake accusations of so-called rule of law in member states. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, can you just pass it to Frank and then we'll take Glenn? Yeah.
I'm not a camel, by the way. So look, I think one of the problems of our side has been that we've allowed ourselves to be dominated by the rule of law narrative. And we kind of want to demonstrate that we're good boys, despite what the EU says, all the time forgetting that the rule of law discussion is a trap, and is designed to be a trap, because what it does is it depoliticizes the real issues at stake by giving legal legal instruments, the main prism through which things are understood. Now, you know, if you look at the development of the concept of the rule of law, in the context today is different than the 18th century. And it's different because what has happened is that over the last 150, 200 years, in liberal legal scholarship, the rule of law has become the first order principle, and democracy the second order principle. And therefore, because the rule of law is seen as trumping democracy, therefore, the violation of what you and I take to be democratic rights is entirely legitimate. And that is why we have a situation where, for example, in Poland, you now have an open acknowledgement that what you're doing is practicing militant democracy, which is a very interesting term. Militant democracy developed in Germany or by Kelsen before the war, but in Germany used to insulate politicians from political pressure. And militant democracy is an oxymoron because it violates them. It basically argues that democracy is conditional. If I like my friends, then democracy can happen on Monday and Tuesday. But if on Wednesday and Thursday I don't like what's going on, then we close down democratic rights because we have the legitimation of doing that. You mentioned transitional justice. I mean, just think about it. Transitional justice relativizes legal norms. Transitional justice, what it does, is it basically allows people to make up the rules as you go along. And in a sense, this is, to me, the central lesson. The rule of law in Brussels is making up rules as you're going on. The law can become flexible so that you can really make it up as you go along. And the one thing that we've learned, and I think Poland is a very sad example of that, is that whenever you internationalize legal instruments, whenever you have an international rule of law, which is what's happening in all the different organizations, it always invariably and without exception becomes an invitation for intervening in the domestic affairs of another nation. And in the old days, we used to call that colonialism, or at least a colonial impulse. Today, we're more civilized. We don't use that kind of a language. But that is what the rule of law sort of system it really represents. And to me, Poland is important as a tragic example, because if they succeed in Poland, if they are managing to dominate Poland in accordance with their rules, then every single country with even an ounce of independent aspiration is going to become the next target. Because let me tell you this, if Poland falls under this trap, then who will be next? Question mark. I can tell you which one, but I'm sure you guessed which one. Which country will be next?
Thanks, Frank. Can you pass it to Werner, and then we'll get some comments from the panel.
Well, I have two remarks in the question. The first remark is a cynical one. During the time of monarchical constitutionalism, there was a wonderful saying, the king can do no wrong. Now in the time of republicanism, of course, the saying goes, the left can do no wrong. So we should not be surprised that if a leftist government is overturning a system of the rule of law, a system of law, then this is a wonderful thing. It's exactly how things should move. Second remark, less cynical. I'm so happy that you introduced the distinction between a formal rule of law and material rule of law, which is at the heart of German legal theory. The issue is, if you focus only on the formal rule of law, as in the European narrative, then you come from the rule of law to the rule by law. And the rule by law puts really the legal system into the service of political visions, political goals to be achieved by whatever mean. Therefore, and now comes my question, you said, well, we have to settle this issue in Poland ourselves. We do not want to get interference, a new interference from the European level. How are you going to do that? Of course, a simple answer is you simply win the next elections. But in order to win elections, you need to get influence onto the political discourse, onto what people think and believe to be right. You have to conquer intellectual hegemony. How do you try to do that in Poland? I really do not know, so you should tell me. And another point was raised that we need to reform the whole European system. Well, wonderful, I would agree with that. How are we going to do that? We have 27 states, we have enormous communicative power invested in the Brussels bubble and so on. Any ideas apart from complaining, because this is what we can do so nicely, to complaining about this bad situation in which we are. But what would be the means to change this whole situation? It's really an open question.
Further questions, but Tobias, a couple of reflections on those questions and comments?
So we won elections in 2015 and the situation in Poland was very difficult. All media were liberal. There was only the Radio Maria, for example, and few very unpopular channels on social media. And nowadays the situation is different. There is a very large conservative television, the Republic. There's also the esprit of society is different after 8 years of our government, you know. So for me, the most important question is what to do on the European level. And I have two solutions or two answers. One is optimistic, second one is pessimistic. Optimistic is that we will win elections in Poland, few right-wing parties in France will win, etc., and we will gain power in European Council. And we will, step by step, we will change the legal framework of European Union and change it and back to the roots, and and we will establish Europe of nations. It's a positive way. But there's also this more pessimistic approach. That's what we see after Draghi's report, that the Madam for the Leyen and this all the mainstream will go ahead to the wall. European taxes, European debt, more Green Deals, etc., etc. And the consequences will be very serious economic problem in whole Europe, in Central Europe and also in the Western Europe. And European Union will collapse like Ottoman Empire when the United States will be very powerful player, China will be very powerful player, and we as Ottoman Empire will collapse inside very slowly and very sadly.
No, thanks. Jerzy?
While I am very much confident when it comes to the state of democracy in Poland and this capacity of the society, of the nation to change the government, even the Tusk government that is being supported from outside and financed from outside in the next years, because the society changed. What Tobias already said is that during last 10, 15 years, the civic society was rebuilt in Poland after 40 years of communism. The first 15 years was artificial civic society planted by George Soros. But with the early 21st century, the truly vivid, healthy civic society grown, and now it is mature. And we have media, we have organizations, and the democracy will secure itself without improper interference from outside. And it is possible also because we have this demos, we have the nation there that can run democracy. And there is no demos on a European level. There is no European nation that will run European Union, and that's why the democratic principle is the second after the rule of law, because there is no possibility to have a democratic principle in a sphere without a demos, without a feeling of membership, without a citizenship, without a loyalty to European Union among the peoples of Europe. And of course, it will be an Ottoman Empire. It will be an Ottoman Empire, and it will collapse in the following years, especially if this already accepted by the European Parliament and the Council 267 amendments to the European treaties will be implemented and will be ratified in the next years by the member states, and the European Union will turn itself into a new European empire, like an Ottoman Empire, centralized, governed from Brussels, without any democratic tools of control over the central government. And then, of course, this collapse of this newly emerging empire will be a bloody collapse. Because before it collapses, it will take over military expenditure, it will take over our borders, it will take over all migration policies, it will take over industry, and before it collapses, it will have to run bankrupt. And it will, of course, and we will, of course, pay the price for the empire, for the collapse of the empire. And the only alternative is to get involved on two levels. To get involved on the national level, that's obvious, but also to get involved on the international level in order to promote an alternative. Of course, it is a bubble against the largest bubble, the mainstream bubble, but we have to promote an alternative for the reform of European Union that is already being put on the table and discussed and negotiated. And I strongly believe that Donald Tusk, under the Polish presidency, will open a convent to push on this project of European reform. So we have to present an alternative to Guy Verhofstadt proposal.
Right. Anna?
Yes, how the Tobias said that in Poland we have problem with industry, economy, budget problem, and we have to convince Polish voters to write program before the next parliamentary election 2027 to vote for us, for the right in Poland. Yeah. Yes. So I hope we don't have any option. We have to win the next election.
Yeah, and can I put, we'll come for some more questions in a second, can I put maybe a finer point of a question to you all, which is, so somebody mentioned Trump coming back in America, and where I'm from in the UK, we have a similar debates every now and again, but the system left by previous governments is so tightly controlled, where the education systems have been taken over, where judges have been put into place, and then they get to add more judges, and the education system becomes self-perpetuating, and NGOs are set up. And so the system put in place by a previous government seems, and we haven't even talked about the civil service, the state bureaucracies that actively frustrate the power of a new government when it comes in. And so I kind of want to put it to you that were we in Tusk's position, we would be advocating something not dissimilar, right? We'd be saying we need to get some of the media back on our side because the deck is stacked against us. We need to take control of the cultural institutions because they're pumping out all of this propaganda. And I just wonder, do we, rather than framing things in terms of the rule of law discussion, are we not really talking about, does a government have the right to exercise its program once elected into power? And so I just want to put, it's maybe not the alternative point of view to you, but would we not want to take advantage of some of the same tools that our enemies maybe are much better at using than we are?
This debate just starts over in Poland after this organic civic society has been growing up in the last 15 or 20 years. This debate on limited government and the rule and the principle of subsidiarity on the national level. Even now, just a week or 2 weeks ago, the debate over the education reform in Poland is very important, because the Tusk government wants to change the curricula of the primary schools and the secondary schools, and of course wants to implement very radical left ideology and the green ideology into the curricula of all schools, private and public ones. And then happened something that has not happened before, even under the conservative government. Nobody questioned the power of the government to form the curriculum during the 8 years of conservative government. Even more so, the conservative government strengthened the grip of the government over the schools in Poland in order to make them more conservative. And now the debate is open. Either, would it be good to allow for more freedom and especially for more parental control over the schools in Poland? So the debate, somehow imported from the United States, is being now circulated among some organic grassroots organizations and political groups in Poland. So hopefully this reinstitution of subsidiarity of limited government approach will emerge not only in different member countries, but also on this European level.
Yeah, well, we'll ask you, assume that a different government comes in 27. We'll ask you whether you still want people to form their own independent approach to education and all the rest of it. I think we
when
want
it comes to it was our agenda for years.
Anna, any thoughts on this?
Yes, yes. I think that and the victory of the Trump in the United States, I think that the problem in the United States and in the European Union is the same. So the problem with the migration, the problem with the economy, the problem with the censorship. So I think the Trump's victory should be for us example how to win and how to create our agenda in the next years.
Even if that means when coming back to power, as it were, you then have to adopt some of these militant democratic approaches.
Yes.
Okay. And Tobias?
I think that we are fighting in many dimensions, social dimension of values, political, legal, etc. Our Western civilization is now has reached a boiling point between the leftists and the right-wing politicians or conservative politicians, how want you to call it. And we are talking today about, in the same time, about means and the goal or aim. The rule of law is for liberal establishment only mean to keep power and to be privileged in the society, to give or rules or principles to everyone how they should live. And for them the principle is to put all the conservatives on the right-wing politicians on the margin, on even out of the margin. So this great debate about fascism, etc., etc. You know. So I look at this problem from this angle. So it's very vital, very important, but I suppose that common sense is with us, with conservative sides, so we should win, but the fight for media, for legal framework, for the legal sphere is very good playground, because you have judges, you have professors, you have experts who are going behind the magic veil, and they came back and they have magic rules for all society. Always the liberal side can say something like that we know what's the democracy, we know what's the rule of law, you don't understand it because you are the fascist, so go away, we'll put you in jail. You know, this is very simple but very effective tool to fight with us. But I don't see that our quarrel, our political debate, that we are using the same arguments that the other side. It's quite different.
Okay, let's take a couple more comments, questions. Anyone want to come in? I'm interested also. Yeah, we'll take one down at the front. Yeah.
Hello. Yes, I think. Oh, sorry. Nothing
Definitely
worked.
working this time.
Okay, yeah, okay. By exception. No, we forget, especially the left or the EU forgets that democracy and rule of law, it's not a political ideology. It's a way of governing. And with the left, it seems to, as you said, it's an instrument, and it's, you know, the German Greens, we represent democracy, which it can't be the monopoly of a party, it's the rules of the game, like the rule of law. Just a question, with the European Court of Justice, isn't that the biggest hurdle? Because they've imposed themselves over national law.
Yeah, very good question. I think we'll reflect on that. Anyone else want to come in? Yeah, let's take these two down at the front if we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think there's feedback. I'll just move across. Just want to ask you about young people's perspective on this, if you've got a feel for that, because I talk to quite a lot of young people, and and also, I'll be honest, my daughter's studying law and politics at the moment at King's College, and she's really taken with this idea of the rule of law. And she can quote and tell me about things from the European Union's rule of law reports, which is kind of scary. But perhaps she's been made to study this stuff. But this idea of the need for some sort of check and balances Yeah? Because isn't that the American Constitution? Checks and balances. We hear it all the time. So this idea of some sort of checks and balances through something like a rule of law report seems to make complete common sense to young people. So I guess what I'm wondering is that partly where the fight needs to be? And how do you articulate that to ordinary people? Make it simple and straightforward. And is it as perhaps, I've always wondered about checks and balances. In the UK, we have the House of Lords. I've always been in favour of banning and abolishing the House of Lords personally. And I've always thought there's been too many checks and balances within America. Do we need to argue for, if you like, a more direct or straightforward mechanism of democracy and genuinely get across the need to trust people and trust the majority vote rather than have these checks and balances?
Great, thanks. Just pass it behind you. Yeah, watch the speaker.
So, hello. I'd like to actually just bounce off Tony's comment and add a young person's perspective and perhaps the perspective of ordinary people. I'd like to bounce off Mr. Saryusz-Wolski's comment as well, where he said, when we engage in these legal disputes on their own terms, all we end up doing is multiplying definitions and arguments. And I think what this has resulted in the minds of many young people and in the minds of many ordinary people is that legalism and law as a whole has just become this very, very bizarre absurdity. It seems now that there are so many precedents, so many definitions, so many interpretations, that at the end of the day, if you can just pick a judge and the judge can decide that the law means what he wants it to decide. Roe v. Wade is perhaps one of the most bizarre examples of this. Somehow privacy leads to abortion, but that's one example. And there are various examples where people now are just totally checked out of any legal disputes. So my question is to the panel in general, do you think we have reached some point now where legalism or the very concept of legalism is almost falling apart? And if so, what lies beyond it?
Great. Anyone else want to get in this round? Because we've got a lot on the table just here. We'll take one more. And then, big questions on the role of what is the law, effectively. But,
Hi. So I just read an interesting article, I think about 1 week ago, in the Verfassungsblog. And it was about from two experts from CEU University in Budapest. And they were talking about how there should be a new chapter in the annual report of the European Commission on the Rule of Law on the EU. And I think it's a pretty good idea, especially coming from that place. And my question would be, if there would be a conservative majority, what proposals would you implement in practice to change the situation? So thinking more about the institutional setup of the EU.
Great, thanks. This is also a good question because it kind of cuts to the heart of, do we want to accept the rule of law framing but just apply it to the EU because we want to do so opportunistically? Or do we need to get rid of the whole rule of law discourse altogether? Do we just need to eject it, or should we use it opportunistically against the EU? But there's also on the table these big questions about the checks and balances. The question I think was very important about the role of the ECJ, which effectively was also this question over here about, have we moved into a legalistic way of thinking rather than a political or an ideological one? But Tobias?
I agree with Saryusz-Wolski. We should reject it, of course, this whole dispute about rule of law. And there is no rule of law in the European Union as a European Commission or European Parliament. And after a few months, I'm newly elected member, but after a few months here, I'm convinced about it. And check and balances in European Union as a international organization, there is not such thing here. So of course, when Montesquieu wrote it, he thought about Great Britain, but you have this institution in United States. There is in Poland, there is a separation of powers, maybe not so strict like in a US constitution, but there is. But here, when you look on this framework, European Commission, European Council, European Parliament, and Court of Justice. There's no such balance. There's other problem that all these institutions they have the same interest to vacuum power from national level to them. So this is the problem. This is structural problem for us. How to cope with this in this structure when we are on the national level, when we govern, and we have this framework of international institutions which are fighting with us, you know. And this is very serious problem, and we should amend treaties. We should change it, and to establish true or real rule of law in the European Union, and it should be our common great task for all conservatives. And I think it's very important, because in otherwise we will create something like Soviet Union.
Jerzy?
I like very much the question on checks and balances. For lawyers, it's everything when it comes to the constitutional law. However, when you invest this power to provide checks and balances to any particular body, especially a body on the international level, like European Commission or European Union itself, and those are the checks and balances that are then utilized against the national level of the member states, you have to put those checks and balances powers under a democratic control. Otherwise, this single body empowered to provide checks and balances will reinterpret from the political point of view the rules and principles in order, in fact, to exert pressure on the national level. And as there are no democratic control tools over effective tools on European level, because we have no demos, European demos, and they may be none implemented, we have to rest checks and balances on the national level. Even more so when it comes to European Court of Justice, ECJ, we have to provide democratic tools, or rather national tools of control over the court itself, over the Curia. Because without those tools of control, they may not be democratic, they have to be national tools of control over the Curia. The Curia will grow without any boundaries, and will vacuum these powers from the nation states. So either it be a grand chamber consisting of members of the constitutional courts from member states, or would it be some kind of a veto power for the constitutional review bodies in nation states? Either way, we have to provide a proper checks and balances, but not from European Union against the member states, but from the member states' perspective against the European Union natural tendency to broaden its power.
I have to add to Tobiasz, because Tobiasz is in the ECR, and I'm in the Patriots for Europe, so we have cordon sanitaire. We out of the European Parliament. We don't have opportunity to represent our voters. And this is the political decision of the EU establishment.
Yes, it's true. I remember that I am coordinator in jury committee, and we voted in camera the statement referring to new commissioners, candidates. Yeah. And the Greens and the left, the communists, they created a problem after the problem. There was truly idiotic problems. So we created bigger coalition to vote, and suddenly it appeared that the left and the Greens they are losing vote after vote after vote. And the coordinator from the left and from the Green, they stood up and they said, "This is not the democracy. We are going out." And I approached them and I told him that you know how to be behind the cordon sanitaire now. But
yes. Yes, that's right. It looks like the Tobiasz said.
It's true story.
Yeah, but Anna, maybe reflect also. I saw you were nodding your head a lot during this question of checks and balances, and also the role of the ECJ. I mean, Do we have to go after? Do we have to be as radical even as going after the concept of supremacy? Do we have to say that how can it have supremacy in that way?
Oh my God, this is very complicated because for example, people really don't understand rule of law, and this is very difficult to convince people to show how it looks like. And for example, my situation, European Parliament, it's very simply to show that look, we have the problem to make some resolution, to show some our opinion. We are outside of the decision. We don't have any president of the committees. So I think that now the not law decide, but legal opinion and the judge, and this is the biggest problem. And in my opinion, change the treaty. It will be very, very difficult. I think that easier to change our national constitutional in Poland and keep the sovereignty, keep the independence. This is for us, for me, is very important.
Yeah, no, great question. And anyone else want to come in, or else we'll ask a couple of questions by way of wrap up. But yeah, okay, maybe two final questions from towards the back, and then we can have one more here.
Hi, maybe it's because I voted Brexit and I'm from England, but it's interesting to me that part of that, I feel a real rub between being an independent country and being in the EU. And so I suppose my question is, if you could wave a magic wand, would you just stop thinking about and being part of this European Union and go back doing something else? But you talked about going back to the European Union of its origins. And if you do want a European Union, what would that look like? Because, you know, in the US, whilst people were banging on about checks and balances, Trump got in. And that was profound. But the profound thing is that a groundswell of a movement came up that people weren't listening to, but also didn't realise was happening. And I wonder if you think something's happening in Europe similarly, or that's it.
Great, thanks. My colleague Richard Schenk at the back.
Yeah, Richard Schenk. I think what we have missed so far is the political the dimension of this rule of law issue in Poland, because it's so obvious that we have somebody like Donald Tusk, who is like Mr. Europe himself, president of the European Council, president of the European People's Party, and he wins the elections at home, and within days the rule of law issues are dropped. So this intertwining between European institutions and rule of law issues in Poland was now so exposed as never before, and I think on the long run this is actually created exposed the illusion of this rule of law issues very much, and this is why the Polish case is so important. And also I will want to add that I think it's very obvious that he wants to use this rule of law as somehow to tame these nations, to expand, to transform Europe into a federal state. It's not going to work, because all working federal states had political union first, and then they implemented a rule of law on top of the political consensus. It's not going to work. It's only going to stir up more political upheaval in the European nation states.
Great, thanks. We'll take one last quick comment from the front, which will be very quick, and then we'll just get some final reflections.
Thank you. I am one of the members of the gang of 6 of Verhofstadt. I was one of 6 co-rapporteurs of this proposal of the treaties. After 2 years and hundreds of hours of fights, I can tell you that the other side is acting in bad faith. I've proposed the changes of the treaties. We could sit and write the new treaty. They refused the subsidiarity chamber. They refused the practice of subsidiarity. They laughed at it. The left, liberal left, majority, is laughing on the principles which are today in the treaties. what is important for them is a grab, naked, brutal, unlawful grab of power. So the answer is win through political action. It will not be done in the conference halls. Do what Trump did. Govern like Orban does. I will not refer to Poland. Two comments on two comments. I mean, the key for me from this debate issue is what was said by Mr. Furedi. Trap. And I see that we are still going into the trap because we talk about rule of law. It is a trap. Yeah. And we here talking about it are guilty. Second trap, Mr. Kwaśniewski. Betting on the Ottoman dissolution of union is so profoundly demobilizing. I said that also in Warsaw in tribunal. Don't count on it. First, in pragmatic terms, it demobilizes. If it will fall apart, why do something? Well, let's go home. So there's a trap, Furedi's trap, and there's this false expectation. No, it will be a bloody oligarchic, hegemonic organism, anti-democratic, ruled by elite and using brutal, punitive instruments.
Okay.
And there are two.
Very good, very good. We'll wrap up.
Thank you.
We can discuss more in the bar, but that's very good. So just a few comments of reflection. I think we need to deal a little bit with the question of what to do, because I think being able to expose the charade of the so-called rule of law claims, we have to be able to talk about it. We have to make this much better known. It doesn't fall into a trap to point out that the rule of law is being used and has been used cynically. So we have to find ways to expose that a lot better. And then we also need to ask ourselves some pretty tough questions about how we respond to this. It obviously begins at home, about winning the political battles in our own nation states at home. But thinking, while we are here in Brussels, and Brussels does exercise some power, what is it? What kind of movements do we want to build? Do we want to build movements towards reform of treaties? Do we just want to share a little bit of political weight with each other in the different political groups, encourage each other, take inspiration from things that happen elsewhere, as some of us do take inspiration from what's recently happened in America? So where do we go, and also how do we expose what's going on, I guess, are the two questions I kind of want to leave you with, to just give us a couple of thoughts before we close. But Jerzy, can I?
I have to disagree that we should not speak of rule of law, because the enemy is speaking of that. And we do not have to agree on what does it mean, but we have to be able to inform the people, the nations, on the true meaning of the rule of law, and that this discussion on the European level is a trap itself. It's my own experience with something like 100 meetings yearly in Poland, that people are growingly aware of that situation, that people are growingly aware that it is a trap, that most of those pressure is coming from, most of this pressure coming from European Commission is a trap against the democracy. It's a trap that will lead Poland into a unitarian European empire without any influence of the people over the central government in Brussels. And together with developing policies of European Union like Green Deal and others that for the first time in history are so much understood, so well understood by the people. People just feel the outcomes of those policies in their wallets, in their everyday life, with those limitations on buying and selling of their property, and possibly inheriting property as well. Those are issues that are absolutely easily understood by the people. So what is the second stage? The first stage is to understand. The first stage is to present the situation in European Union, present the language of European Union. The second stage is to mobilize politically the people against this organism of European Union that it is developing into the European empire. And the question, should we wave this magical wand in order to find ourselves out of European Union? In a democratic reality, it's impossible. In a democratic reality, without a strong alliance of independent, sovereign countries, we will not find strength and power to either reform or to get out of falling European empire. Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, other countries, we are not United Kingdom. We do not have our Commonwealth and our network, and we do not have our tradition and power in order to get out from European Union without the government being changed by Brussels before the final decisions are made. So we have to prepare for this final move, just in case the European empire is emerging in the next years, but we have to prepare for that with at least regional alliances and regional cooperation of our countries.
Great, good sentiments to end on. Anna.
Of course, this is a political battle, and I think that we are against the centralization of the European Union. So the people understand European Green Deal Pact, Migration Pact, and etc. So we now choose between our sovereignty, our independence, between the European Union and the centralization. And I hope that Poles understand this situation, and I hope that it will be a glad prognostic for the future.
Hope so, yeah.
You know, when we think about England, you have one very important advantage, that England is an island. So, you know, your geopolitics is quite different than landlocked geopolitics of Poland between Germany and Russia. And the English Channel or Canal La Manche is much wider from cultural and political point of view than Atlantic Ocean. So your point of view and Brexit, it's other dimension of politics than from our point of view. So we should make and maybe prepare every time account of advantages and disadvantages of European Union. And there are a lot of advantages of free market, free movement, cooperation between students, universities, societies, etc. But this European concept was stolen, as Mr. Saryusz-Wolski always is saying, by the left. And they are creating now something quite different than the original project. You know, this is the centralized leftist project, which is some kind of bubble tower. And from my point of view, we should fight. We should create networks between conservatives from different countries, because we have the same principles, and the fight is the same on the European level. And when we are in plenary session, during the plenary session, when we listen, all conservatives, all right-wing parties representatives, we are on the same page. When we are talking about European Union, the differences are different. Russia and the other sometimes free market or some economic background. But when we think about Europe of nations without such a bureaucracy, without inflation of law, and without this all ideological agenda, we are on the same page. So we should make new networks, create such events like this one. Thanks for MCC, and I suppose that we will win this fight, because the common sense and the economic point of view is on our side.
No, well, thanks. That was a good. Can we thank the panel? A great sentiment to end on. Okay, so just before I invite you all to head downstairs and enjoy a glass of wine and a little nibble to eat, I want to tell you about our next major event, a conference we're hosting called Culture War Goes Global, Geopolitics in a New Era. We talked a little bit today about how the election of Trump has shaken a few things up, but we think very importantly that Trump has made almost decision time for a number of big issues on Europe. The obvious ones, what to do in Ukraine, how should we support or bring a resolution to the conflict in Israel, what do we do about China, and what do we do about America if there are going to be tariffs and all the rest of it. But there are these big decisions that we have to take. But our thesis, if you like, our theory, our tentative suggestion that underlies the conference is that these questions have been pressing on us for a very, very long time. And it's not just Trump that's made us need to answer them. And so instead, we need to ask some really fundamental questions about who are we? What is Europe? What are our vision for the future? Do we even believe in the nation state anymore? And unless we answer those really big, important questions, having any clarity on the geopolitical questions is very, very difficult, if not impossible. So we hope that you'll better join us on the 20th at the hotel in Brussels. All of the details are in the flyer on your seat. But for us, I think it's very timely, but a really, really important conference, offering us a chance to ask some big, fundamental questions about where we are and where we're headed in Europe. So I'll see you at the bar first, but then I'll see you at the conference later. So thank you.